From coast to coast to coast, Canadians are facing a housing crunch that seems to get worse by the day. In Ontario, the plan to address that crisis has also led to a political controversy for Premier Doug Ford. It all has to do with what's called the Greenbelt, protected land Ford's government promised not to open up for development during the 2021 campaign. Ford insists the situation, though, has changed. The crisis has worsened, so opening up the land had to happen. The opposition accuses him of doing it to help his developer friends. Two independent investigations have concluded the process through which that land was opened up was problematic, to say the least, something the housing minister acknowledged when he resigned yesterday. Following the resignation, the premier shuffled his cabinet and says the Greenbelt plan will be, quote, reevaluated, but offered few specifics about what that means. Let's bring in the front bench to talk about what it may mean politically. With me this evening, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is CTV National News Ottawa correspondent Judy Trin. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had a wonderful summer. Lisa, I want to start with you. It appears to me like, and the Premier's being kind of actually blunt about this, that he has made the political calculation that Ontarians care more about the 1.5 million homes getting built or addressing the housing crisis than the means through which he ends up getting there. Do you think that's an astute political calculation or not?
I think it's the only political calculation you can make right now, because I'm sure that backing out of the deals that have been struck is going to be very costly, and it doesn't necessarily put an end to the criticism that's been happening. Any government, especially majority governments, can make any decision they want to with respect to how they want to handle lands, how they want to handle policies. What tripped them up here is the process they followed is flawed, and they had different bodies that investigated it. And as a result, they've been shown to be lacking. But the fundamental ability for the government to make this decision still rests with this government, and they have made the calculation, as you point out, that they're not going to get harmed necessarily at the ballot box in making this decision. The question is, though, how effective will the opposition parties be in saying that this doesn't smell right and that his buddies are being helped, which is the narrative that helps the opposition the most?
Yeah, it seems to me for sure, and we had the opposition leaders on, Tom, that is kind of what they have decided resonates most with Ontarians who are worried, right? This idea that the government led by this premier is helping out his developer friends versus the calculation the premier's made, which is Ontarians just want the housing crisis addressed. They'll probably eventually forgive me. Like I'm putting words in his mouth, but that's the sense I get from what he said so far. Which side of the aisle do you fall on there?
I don't think that that's going to carry the day. If you look at the Auditor General's report, the first report that came out on this, she couldn't have been clearer. There was other land that could have been used to build those 1.5 million homes. They didn't lack land. This is a very old trick. We've been through it here in the province of Quebec, and we went through a rough time when a lot of these practices were put under a microscope for pure corruption. If you have land, whether it's wetlands or precious habitat or prime agricultural land that's set aside and preserved, it's not supposed to be developed, they can buy that for pennies per square foot. But then if somehow magically it gets extracted or it gets exempted, it becomes many dollars per square foot. That's what seems to have happened here. When it's gone from a simple administrative review within the government to a review by the OPP that says, oops, we don't even want to have the appearance of a conflict of interest, we're bringing in the RCMP to look at this, that's when everybody around Doug Ford starts getting nervous. He's an extraordinarily good political communicator. I've learned that throughout this crisis. Today, it was not only about the houses, he's doing this for you, as Trump would like to say, but at the same time, he's going to be more respectful of First Nations, don't you know? These precious wetlands, these precious and delicate habitats for biodiversity are also things that are necessary to deal with the reality of climate change that we've been watching on our screens all summer, the forest fires and the flooding. You know, those wetlands are there to absorb in case of floods, and if you fill everything in with gravel and you build it all up, you're not going to have that sort of protection. That's why you have a green belt to begin with. So I think that the whole picture has to be looked at. Ford is going to do his best to distract and to accuse the Liberals before him, but people are going to keep an eye on him because he's the premier of the province. He's the first minister of the province, and it is, I believe, Vassy, all about ministerial responsibility. He's going to have trouble dodging his responsibility in this.
I want to jump off just a point that Tom made, Brian, because it alluded to the political resiliency of Doug Ford thus far, right? I think back to the pandemic and the very sharp criticism that he received, that he was able to ultimately acknowledge, say I'm sorry, and move on in a way that I didn't see a lot of other premiers during the pandemic be able to, at least. And a lot of that had to do with being able to say, I was wrong, right? And you can tell in the press conferences on this subject over the last number of days, he doesn't want to go that far. He'll say the process was flawed, but he's sticking to his guns on the actual plan. Are you surprised at all by that? And do you expect that political resiliency to persist?
Not surprised. I believe that Doug Ford truly, sincerely believes that building those houses that he has promised, 1.5 million over the next few years, is the most important thing he can do for Ontario and or for his political success. Maybe they go hand in hand. So I really do believe that he thinks that that is the most important thing, and maybe he's right. To Lisa's point, though, whether he's right or wrong, whether that's exactly the level to which he's giving the importance to this policy, it can be questioned, but to Lisa's point, it's kind of the only move he has now, given that the process has been found to be flawed. Now, to your question specifically, I think that I'm not surprised, because I think that he is telling himself, look, at the end of the day, when I go to the polls, I have to show movement on building homes and building houses. That's what people care about. So I'm still going to do, to Tom's point, my kind of folksy sort of approach to things, plain speak, talking about the issues that people really care about and that I know resonate. I'm going to speak with, my heart, and he's good at that. He's very good at that. So he doesn't want to go as far to say that, I'm sorry and it was wrong, because he still wants to focus on the houses. He still wants to focus on making that a pillar for the next few years of his government, and he sees, for whatever reason, that doing what he's doing with the Greenbelt as the solution to it. The only thing that's unfortunate, there's quite a few things that are unfortunate, but one thing that I would add that's unfortunate is the idea that, and I agree with your preamble, Vassy, in the sense that he's focused on houses, and then the oppositions are kind of focused on the process, which, look, lots of questions should be had with regards to process. But to Tom's point, environmental protection, what the Greenbelt means for climate change, what it means for biodiversity, and the economic, the social, environmental impact that the Greenbelt has on Ontario and the country is sort of being pushed aside as everybody sort of parks their messages there.
I think that's a totally fair point, Judy. I think it's brought up, and it certainly is invoked in the discussion and the debate around this, but the primary back and forth between the opposition and the Premier or the government has really been around the politics of the process. This accusation, basically, if you want to boil it down, that the Premier's trying to help out his friends.
Well, let's go back to some of the adjectives that have been used. Corruption, possibly, a sham. What I think will perhaps knock a little bit of the Teflon off Doug Ford is this presence of Mr. X. The province, the people of Ontario might be able to buy Doug Ford's argument that, yes, he's doing it for them. He's going to make this housing crisis better for them. But he can't really dodge anything if the RCMP uncovers possible misconduct. Let's go back to Mr. X. This person who is an unregistered lobbyist was involved in perhaps negotiating $1 million fee for securing Greenbelt land for development. He also offered civil servants Raptors tickets as well as rounds of golf. So the question now is, can the Premier abide by the fact that something smelly is going on like that? Will he persevere? Can he endure that public backlash? And the public might not understand the numbers, but they feel that something is wrong here when it comes to this unregistered lobbyist.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a sense among a lot of Ontarians that something's up. I think the question is, to what degree as kind of circling back to what Lisa said, is the opposition able to kind of build on that and see it resonate further? I just want to quickly point out before we go to break that the OPP referred it to the RCMP. We've all invoked the RCMP here, but the RCMP has not actually announced, and usually doesn't, as you've reported many times, Judy, whether or not they're investigating. If that were to be confirmed, my guess is The drip drip of the story gets a lot drippier. We're going to take a break with the front bench. They are sticking around. On the other end of that break, we're going to circle back to a story we've been covering this evening. A growing group of premiers are asking the Bank of Canada's governor to put an end to hiking interest rates. We'll discuss the politics of wading in on the Bank of Canada's decision.